someplace else.
How's everybody doing?
Hello.
Hello.
Mr. Mayor, how are you?
Mr. Mayor. Good, Carl. How you doing?
Oh, not too bad. Did you take a look, Jonathan, just right before we get started, at the email I sent out with the proposed additional language?
No.
Ordinance 29. Just take Paula said that it met her needs, so I think we just pull it. I proposed the additional language and you guys passed on second reading.
Did you send it to everybody, Carl?
I did not, because I was just all it is. I can send it out, Charlie. All it is adding to the two successive terms just an additional sentence. An individual may serve multiple non-successive terms on the same board or commission.
Oh, that's fine with me. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's implicit in the original language, but I was just making it express.
Yeah, I'm great with that. I'm just reading it right now.
Okay.
Yeah, that certainly was our intent. So.
Yeah, no, I like I said, I was being overly lawyerly probably and just thought it was included.
All right. Well, we're already running behind time, so I'll start us off. Welcome, everybody. Let me get participants up. I'm going to promote. Gretchen, I see you have your hand. I'm going to allow you to talk, but moreover, I want to promote you and everybody to a panelist, if that's okay. Let's see. Maris, you got promoted. Stark. Sorry, guys, just promoting everybody. Ron, how you doing?
Mr. Mayor, I have a solution if anybody storms the meeting. You just do this with your computer. You just close your laptop. Okay?
I thought we were going to sacrifice you, Tony.
No, we're not in this chamber, so we're okay.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, I know if we were there, I would be at the front. Okay, go see who it is.
It looks like I have a phone caller in 8266. Does anybody know that phone caller? I'm going to promote that person because I'm pretty sure that they're. I don't know if I can promote.
You have Ron, though, right?
I do have Ron.
Yeah, good.
Okay. Well, yeah. Let's start it off. This is our. We're trying to be more intentional about having boards and commissions meet with us at least once a year. Sometimes, if there's something very exciting or dynamic going on that we need more advice or consulting from a board and commission, we might meet with them more than once a year. But I don't believe we've met with historical preservation at least in a year, and possibly longer than that. So this is just kind of a forum where we can sit down and meet with you guys and kind of go over what you guys have on your plate, so we're more informed as a council, and also to maybe get direction from where we as a council would like to see you guys go. So it's definitely a two-way conversation. And with that, I will turn it over to Ron Carson, the board chair, for him to lead us.
Jonathan, could we ask that people show their faces so we can see who we're talking to? Since this is the first time I've met the historical board, so be great.
If you're able to turn on your video feed, if you have that capability, that would be really great.
Are you able to hear me?
I can, Ron. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Very. See you. Are we able to see you?
No, you won't be able to see me. I don't have a camera at the location that I'm at.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And is Gretchen?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? I just unmuted. No.
We can see you and hear you.
Oh, you see, but do you hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, good.
I hear you.
I'll quit screaming at you.
I can't hear her. No, I'm just kidding.
I'll go put my head out the window. I'm only blocks away. You'll be able to hear me.
Yes, I know.
Oh.
Hey, Ron, this is Gretchen. I'm here.
Oh, very good, very good.
I'm gonna kill her for this.
Mr. Mayor, if you will, I'm going to share my screen because Ron and I are doing a partnership here. I'll be running a PowerPoint and he'll be talking to you guys.
That would be great.
Wait. What are we drinking?
Diet Coke. I got yelled at by a judge for eating during a WebEx, Mr. Hanlon.
Okay, Ron, it's up.
All right, very good. Well, I want to thank everyone for inviting us to your meeting. I think that it's very valuable for the commissions to and the boards to have an opportunity to interact with council. I think the comments that Jonathan made very much represent the interaction that I think is really valuable for our community. So again, thank you very much for inviting us. We wanted to spend a little bit of time just sharing what we were able to accomplish last year. As everyone knows, last year was a challenge with having to meet virtually. And so we weren't able to get to everything on our work plan. Each year we have developed a work plan, which is basically a list of activities that we hope to accomplish that year. We've broken it down into steps as much as we can and assigned those steps to different commissioners. And so that has helped to facilitate making progress on some of our long and short-term goals. The other thing that we did, or that we consistently do with our meetings, is that we try to address any new issues that arise. There's a proposal, for example, to do some renovations and changes with a property downtown on on Grand Avenue. And we were able to see some of the basic information about that and have the opportunity to provide some feedback about that. So we have been doing things like that month to month as they arise. The topics that we wanted to share with you today have a bit to do with some of the big accomplishments that we feel like that we were able to do last year, and then to talk a little bit about some of the important activities that we have on our list that we want to accomplish, and that it would be valuable for us to get some assistance from City Council on being able to accomplish these particular tasks. The things that we will share that we did last year, annually we have a preservation award that we give out, and the preservation award is important from the Historic Preservation Commission perspective because it helps give us the opportunity to recognize property owners and activities that have been directed at preserving, renovating in historically valuable ways. And the two properties that we want to recognize for their activities, you can see in the plaques that are shown on the screen, the Davis family for their work on preserving 719 Grand Avenue, and then the Melville family for their work on the Hotel Colorado. And this is also an opportunity for us to be able to engage with the community and be able to share valuable information with property owners and the community as to the value of preservation. And I think that's one of the issues that's really important to us that we'll come back to a little bit later in some of the comments that hopefully we'll have time to get to in a little bit. The next aspect of work that we were focused on is related to the interpretive signs. And there's been a number of things that we've been working on with that. On the images, you can see on the right the kiosk that's under the bridge, which provides some background, some historical information of interest. And what we have been working on are other signs, other interpretive signs that we feel like are important or have been required by CDOT and the State Historical Society. For example, an interpretive sign for the 8th and Midland area to interpret the significance of the Aspen branch of the Rio Grande Railroad. And in addition to that, we have been working on a number of other interpretive signs, and we're in various stages of being able to work on those and make progress. And one of those that we want to highlight is the Pikes Peak Ocean to Ocean Highway. This was an early, and as you can see in the information in front of you, this was a designated route from 1914 when the automobile was just starting to be used for more of this cross-country type of travel. It did go through Glenwood Springs. There is a route through Glenwood Springs, which was basically the Donegan Road, but it also followed Highway 6 and 24. 6 and 24 was a later designation for that route. But one of the things that we want to do is highlight this route through Glenwood Springs, but this also gives us the opportunity as a springboard to be able to interface with larger groups. For example, some of the bike trails and some of the neighboring communities to be able to connect up a bike trail, for example, on this Pikes Peak Ocean to Ocean Highway route as it comes through our area. So we are in the process of working through some of the interpretive sign layout. But as you can see in the lower right-hand corner, this is the sign that designated that route. So what we hope to be able to do would be to place an interpretive sign along the route, but also to post that PPOO designation along the route as well. Other interpretive signs that we're interested in would be the train station and recognizing the importance of that train station for train travel through our area. Another interpretive sign would be for the Hot Springs Historic District, which would include the Hot Springs Pool, Hotel Colorado, the Yampa Vapor Caves, and this would also be valuable for highlighting the significance of those particular points of interest in our community. We also hope to be able to highlight other points of interest and work with the Downtown Development Authority to post interpretive signs in the downtown area as a way to celebrate Glenwood's history. The other activity that we've been involved with is this architectural or historical survey. What the architectural survey is doing is it's giving us a better understanding of the history of each of the buildings, each of the properties that are within the area that we designated for the study. So in 2018, the city received a grant from History Colorado to conduct an historical and architectural survey of 32 to 34 downtown buildings in a roughly 3-block area from 7th Street to 8th and Grand to Blake Avenue. A consultant was hired to conduct the survey, and so far he's completed evaluations on 23 properties. So although the process is not complete, the surveyor has already identified a potential historic district within that survey area. He also has identified 10 buildings that are eligible for landmarking, and of those 4 qualify for those, of those 4 of them qualify for the National Register. These are the Juicy Lucy's, Hotel Denver, the Everett grocer on the northwest corner of 8th and Cooper, and then the Cooper Avenue Liquors. In addition to individual site histories, the consultant will prepare will be shared with council. The survey will be completed August 2021. If we can meet in person, the commission will invite the property owners to our survey area to meet the consultant and hear a summary of the survey results. More likely, this will have to be done remotely. It's important that we continue and expand the survey to other areas of downtown, because growing redevelopment pressures in the downtown area threaten to forever change the city's unique historic character. Surveys provide a list of architecturally and historically significant buildings and put developers on notice early in their planning and design process which buildings are important and require additional scrutiny. More fundamentally, the survey reveals historic character and provides the legal foundation that the city needs to guide the preservation-related decisions. And I think that gives you a little bit of a highlight of why having these surveys are important, because we can go through our neighborhoods and we can see some of the buildings that for whatever reason have some appeal to us and may appear to have some history that could be valuable. But unless we do the survey, we really don't know how valuable that particular property is from a historic perspective. It's not just the structure of the building. Some of our properties in the downtown area have also been used by individuals that are historically prominent, that are socially important, both for Colorado nationally, but also locally. So the surveys have really been valuable for us in gaining more understanding about these individual properties, and also an understanding of our community and how these different areas, these potential historic districts, for example, interrelate together. And so one of the things that we hope to do is to continue on with doing more of these historical surveys so that we can better able to manage the future projects and some of the pressures that we have in Glenwood Springs to continue to develop the downtown area, for example. Future projects that the commission is interested in and have discussed and have a focus on include areas like the Hot Springs Historic District, the South Canyon Coal Camp, and continuing to work on and producing through printing and distribution of our landmark booklet, which I'll come to shortly. These projects have short-term and long-term benefits for our community. I'll touch on that a little bit as we go through each of those areas. One of the underlying aspects of this is that's important for the Historic Preservation Commission is that we need to hire consultants to help us move these projects along. The consultants are critical for us to be able to get that historic district designated officially, for example. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. So the Hot Springs Historic District is 6th Street from Pine to the Yampa Vapor Caves, and it includes the Hotel Colorado, the Hot Springs Pool and Bathhouse, the city's hydroelectric building, the Yampa Vapor Caves, and the train station. And so you can see that highlighted on the map. This area is eligible as a National Register Historic District, and you may have noticed that there are several road signs that already point the way to this historic district. It's important to note that this is not an official designation. And so what we are trying to create is to get that official designation. Creating the district requires approval by more than 50% of the landowners. We know that the Union Pacific Railroad will not be supportive. This is based on prior interactions that the city of Glenwood Springs has had with Union Pacific, but we do have support from other property owners in the area, but we will need to get formal approval from the city, for the city-owned property, from the owners of the Yampa Vapor Caves and the Hot Springs Pool and the Hotel Colorado. The Hotel Colorado and the Hot Springs Pool have already informally expressed their support, pending approval by their respective boards and management teams. So we have interest. I think there's a growing awareness of the value of these historic districts to communities like Glenwood Springs. And so I think that it's an important project and an important process for us. The consultant that we need to hire to complete this, the rough estimate that we have is that it would start around $18,000. This would allow us to hire someone who's familiar with the details of the process of doing the designation, and that would help lead us through that. One of the things that I think is important about the designation for the historic district is some of the information that I pulled off of National Trust for Historic Preservation. And I won't take the time to go through all of this. I think it's in a packet or a folder that you have available or will have available to you. But as you read through the 10 different items that are in this list, what you will see is both some of the impact for the community itself in terms of acting as an incubator for small businesses, providing an environment that is pleasant for people to spend time, providing an environment that is conducive for heritage tourism, providing an environment that has some beneficial impacts on environment because of some of the energy efficiencies of the way that the old buildings were designed. So there's a range of benefits for having the historic designation. So I would encourage you to read, through that list. Okay. The next topic that is important for the historic preservation and I believe for the community that we live in is South Canyon. For those that are not already aware, there is an historic mining site in South Canyon known as Coal Camp. It operated between 1903 and 1951. Today, the site consists of 4 distinct areas. The areas include 27 known rock and concrete building foundations, a few eroding stone wall fragments, rusting mining equipment, and vacated road and railroad beds. It's overgrown with vegetation, and that covers nearly all of the coal camp remnants. Portions of the coal camp are eligible for the National Register, significant for the interpretive value of the area's early coal mining and railroading histories. In 2017, the city contracted with a well-known mining archaeologist and historian to prepare a cultural resources report which detailed how coal camp functioned historically. The report included a series of recommendations about each area. That included developing a multi-use recreational trail through and to some of the sites, add interpretive signage, investigate and study many of the sites, use the sites for public archaeology project, and develop a management plan. Today, Coal Camp is part of city-owned designated open space. It is in proximity to the city's landfill and a shooting range. mountain bike trails have been developed in the canyon, and there is increased interest in making additional recreational improvements. Coal Camp is important to the city's history and to a regional mining history. It is a heritage attraction that should be maintained, preserved, and enhanced. Therefore, the commission requests that it be included in any planning to improve South Canyon, and that council budget money so the commission could hire a consultant to prepare a management plan, which will create a strategy to protect and preserve the area into the future. The estimated cost is approximately $15,000 to hire that consultant. There's just to underscore a little bit of what I just stated, there has been increased pressure to develop and to make recreational improvements in South Canyon. And one of the things that's really vital for the preservation aspect is to get this management plan in place so that we know the best way to interface with managing this area along with the preservation that is intended. The last item that I want to bring up in terms of our future activities relates to our landmark booklet. In 2015, the commission wrote and printed a booklet of landmarked and significant properties. It is updated annually as needed when we designate additional properties with landmark status. Originally, printed copies were available at hotels, the Chamber Visitor Center, and bed and breakfast in the area. Due to budget constraints this year, we were not able to print the booklet. Instead, we made it available on the city's website, but we would like to have the printed booklet available. This has been a very popular item for visitors, and the printing costs are about $4,000 for a color run of the 1,000 books. And so those are the activities and the summary of what we've been working on. So any questions, comments?
I am not seeing any right now, Ron. Oh, there we go. Ingrid, go ahead. We have, guys, just so we know, we have RAFTA coming up in like 4 minutes. I'll let this go over a little.
Okay.
Sorry. Probably half hour is not enough time, and so I apologize. So let's, Ingrid, Shelley, and then Charlie.
Thank you so much for all your work, for your presentation this evening. Just it's always so much fun to engage with the history of our town. I'm curious, I'm looking on the city, I pulled up the city webpage to see if I could find the link to the book. And I don't see the link to the book. But in addition, I'm curious if you guys, the 2018 survey pages for each individual property, are those available anywhere, or is that in kind of an in-house document?
So Gretchen can probably answer that better than I, but it's in progress. You know, some of the things that we're doing with that are in progress, so it hasn't been completed, and that may be why it's not on the website, but perhaps Gretchen can address that.
Yeah, Ron is correct, Ingrid. Those are, right now, the surveys are in draft form. So when it is completed, my intention is to have it on the city's website. And with regard to the landmark booklet, you're right, it is buried in the planning pages on in the community development part of the website. I think I can work with Jen and others to maybe get what do they call it, a vanity URL, so it's easier to find.
That would be fantastic. That's
Okay,
awesome.
thanks.
And then I'm just going to put my personal opinion that I think that the value of the work you're doing definitely warrants having funds available for the publication of that so that it can be disseminated to the local community, because I think that it's a wealth of knowledge. So thank you. Thanks for coming.
Oh, thank you.
Jen, go ahead. Jen.
Sorry, I thought I unmuted myself. There is a vanity URL. It's cogs.us/historic, and it will take you to all of those things, and we can build a button as well. So
Cool. All right. Shelley, then Charlie.
Hi, all. I'm sorry I was a little bit late this evening, but thanks so much for the presentation. It's really nice to see all the great work you guys are doing. It's really interesting. And I'm especially interested also in your work with South Canyon. And I will put a plug in again to council. We've been pushing to do a master plan for South Canyon, just to include all the different uses out there and what needs to be protected and where we can do more recreation. And I think this is a great piece to have included in that. So thank you very much and keep up the great work. Thanks.
Thank you.
Charlie.
Yeah, real quickly, Ron, I just want to say the same thing. I really appreciate this. You told me things that I did not know about Glenwood, so I do really appreciate the that perspective. I think it's helpful to our tourism industry to make this as available as possible. Whether you've mentioned a couple of fundings you might need to continue these surveys, and I would ask you through Gretchen to work with our staff and see what we can do and bring that back to us as a council. You know, I know I would support that funding, so please pursue it through Gretchen and city staff and bring it back to us. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Charlie. I think that's really critical for us to be able to move this forward. So we will come back to you with that. Thank you very much.
Go ahead, Steve.
Well, I just want to say on behalf of the Davis family, thank you very much for considering our building for that award. We certainly went to an awful lot of effort and expense to maintain the historical character of the building. So it means a lot to us. Thanks a lot.
Oh, and thank you very much.
So we had a couple of requests today for funding. I really like the three requests I remember is Cole Camp, the historical district, as well as the booklet. So Jen, I see you popping up. Can you summarize better than I did?
I think what we determined was that any future kind of effort related to the historic district or any other future investigations to whether there are eligible buildings should be done and completed once we finalize this grant. So we got the money, I think, or the approval at least in 2018. The coronavirus slowed us down. I think we thought we would be done with that piece of the investigation and the related information that we would need to move forward if somebody did want to put their building on the historic register or the local register or the state register. So that piece, I think we have it in our minds. We just want to make sure that we get through that piece with the grant, because we would seek a grant from the state again. But generally the state likes to have those grants completed before you ask for additional dollars. I did not put the booklet in my budget this year. We probably could figure out a way to do that. We just were being very conservative in terms of the budget this year. So that also impacted the River Commission's dollars for kind of the outreach that they'd like to do as well in the community development budget.
So I would like to clarify one thing. So the grant that is in progress that we need to get completed is for that historical survey. That's different than what we're talking about with the Hot Springs District, because that survey information has already been done there. So that's ready to move forward to the next step of working through the process of designation. And then the Cole Camp has already been evaluated and surveyed in that regard. So it's ready to go on to that management plan. So I just wanted to make sure that I clarified that.
All right, and I guess I would go ahead, Deborah.
I just wanted to remind council, I mean, some things are out of our budgets that typically wouldn't be, because we did project a 10% decline in sales tax. So departments had to cut things.
Thanks. I get that. I guess I might, my suggestion would be that it's a tough time to ask for things outside of the budget for this year until we have a better idea, maybe 3 or certainly 6 months into the year. Not saying no, it can't happen, but I think any extra amounts we have to be very cautious of. But we did talk about, and I think we talked about throwing $10,000 or $20,000 at a master plan light for South Canyon. And I don't know where we are with that. I don't care where we are right now with that. I don't need an update on that or a correction on it. But at some point, I think it's very important to incorporate those historical structures in Cole Camp into, whatever is contemplated out there. So that'd just be my 2 cents. Any last things for the good of the order?
Mr. Mayor, I just would note that I agree our budget's tight, but $4,000 for a booklet, I would hope that we could, and I do appreciate that those issues, but I would hope that we could find that money and get that booklet published. I think it'd be a good thing if it comes out about June, July, which hopefully we're starting to open up again by that point in the town. And Deborah, I don't mean to contradict you, but I you know how much I'm tight of the budget too, so.
I just want you guys will you're going to have one of these every meeting, and every meeting, every board and commission is going to feel very strong about what they do and want money. And we totally understand. I mean, trust me, I want to start spending money too right now. It's just be judicious in what we spend.
I would like to make one other comment, and I do appreciate the fact that budgets are tight. And as Deborah is indicating, everybody's going to be asking for money. Part of my intention in bringing the funding aspect up today is that I feel like that as a commission, we're stuck. We can't move some of these things forward unless we can figure out a way to do some funding. We've attempted to apply for grants and be self-funding in that respect, but I feel like that we're just kind of stuck. And what I don't like about that from a personal perspective is I feel like that we're all working very hard, just as you are, on our respective areas, and I don't want to feel like we're just spinning our wheels, so to speak. So thank you very much for inviting us here and having the discussion with us. I very much appreciate that.
Thank you very much, Ron. We appreciate what you guys do. Everybody gives a lot of time in our boards and commissions. I think, Deborah, what I realized from this first one is we probably need 45 minutes because it just goes by too quick. So I think in the future, if that's okay, I would also say, Charlie, we're already 7 days into the year. You're trying to spend money we haven't had budgeted. Thank you for that. But I would really like maybe, Deborah, maybe quarterly, you and or Steve to come before us and say, hey, here's kind of an update on sales tax. We all get those reports, but just, we're not quite down 10%. So there might be an opportunity to, do a little bit more. And here is some of the additional priorities we have. I think literally the first week of the year might be too soon for that, but I'm excited to hear back maybe after, in April about what opportunities there might be if we're not. And if we're certainly down more than 10%, then we have to have harder conversations.
So kind of not a fully flushed budget update quarterly, but just this is where we think we're with our revenues, and understand like by April, we'll only know 2 months. Right?
Correct.
Okay. Steve, do we think we can do that?
Yes, ma'am. I think we can do that fine.
Thank you.
And I fully expect to hear, we're actually up 10% and we have all this money left. So that's really where I'm hopefully going with that.
And trust me, it has gone against my nature to say no about spending money as much as I have in the last year.
Just make Jen do it. Jen says no to me all the time. So she's very good at that. It's not against her.
She's better at it than I am. It's true. Yeah.
All right.
It is one of the I agree.
All right, we're 10 minutes behind on RAFTA. Thank you again, Historical Preservation Commission. We appreciate the input. Let's move on to RAFTA.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ron.
Okay, bye.
How are we doing, RAFTA? Who's starting off with that? Is that our staff with Terry, or is that Parsons? Is that Rafta? We're probably not Parsons, probably Rafta or Terry, right? Do I need to promote people?
I'd pull over Terry to start.
David Johnson, Kurt Ravenschlag. I'm just pulling everybody over now. Except Michaela. I don't know who Michaela is. You're not allowed to come over, Michaela.
No,
Is that your ringtone, Tony?
the city mounts meeting. Hold on a sec.
All right. I think I brought over everybody that needs to be brought over.
Good afternoon, Council. I'll start, and then I might turn it over to Kurt or others from RAFTA that might want to speak. We're in front of you this afternoon to talk about, again, a funding shortage in the first week of January. This involves the 27th Street underpasses, as well as the MOVE study itself. So as you guys may remember, RAFTA has been working in conjunction with the city on the 27th Street underpasses. We were successful in getting a number of grants from the state, a little over $3 million in grants from the state to be able to begin work on that project. The total cost for the project right now is projected to be about 10.1 million, including construction management. The city did set aside 500,000 in the 2021 budget to be able to leverage grants. And we did make an application to the Federal Mineral Lease District. That application was not successful. So we weren't able to come up with any additional funding there. We've also discussed this project with DOLA, and DOLA has said that because, at least 90% of it is in the state right away, and they really can't help us with funding. So we are in a little bit of a funding shortage, or a lot of a funding shortage. Our current sources of revenue for the project right now are RAFTA's Destination 2040 funds. They allocated $4,279,500. And again, a little over $3 million in grant funding from the state, which leaves us with a funding gap of about 2.27 million. RAFTA has proposed to try to cover this funding gap because they believe it's a really important project. I think from the city standpoint, we also believe it's a really important project. As far as our former chief of police, he thought that, it should have been our highest priority, for a long time. And he always reminded me that, we had numerous near misses, particularly with the Rio Grande crossing of 27th Street. And, we also had a fatality on State Highway 82 at that intersection. So I do think it's important to try to find funding for this. And again, RAFTA has offered to try to cover that funding gap of 2.27 million. The way they're proposing to try to cover the funding gap, though, is through the Destination 2040 funds. They in the Destination 2040 measure, there were a number of projects and operational improvements, I guess, for the city. And some of those were LOVA and some of those were Southbridge. Those funding amounts will stay. But what they are proposing is to take some of the funding that was designated for operational improvements to Glenwood. And so specifically, they were thinking about the extension of BRT to downtown Glenwood. We have been thinking about that in the MOVE study. We haven't finalized an option yet. Haven't really, been able to finally, begin to move that forward. So that amount was 298,000. There's also the rerouting of the RAFTA local buses to Highway 6 and 24. Some of you may remember that when we did our own transit operations plan, we thought that we should begin to move our system away from a fixed route system into an on-demand system. And it was last year actually that we had $60,000 in the budget to do a trial of an on-demand system. When Linda and I had our first conversations after Tanya left with the company who had helped us with the operations study about trying to get that that on-demand study or on-demand trial period done, they said, really you needed to do a good trial for an on-demand system. You really need closer to $1 million to go through a year-long trial of an on-demand system. So, we obviously were really underfunded for last year's budget and, underfunded again in this year. So, that rerouting of our own bus off of 66 and 24 hasn't occurred. And so, those funds are technically available, I guess, at about 400,000. Obviously, those two amounts don't come to the total of our deficit there, but RAFTA believes that there are other operational funds that they might be able to pull. And so that is the direction that we're heading at this point. But what we wanted to do was to make you aware of it and see if the council had any objections to the idea of deferring those operational funds for another, I guess until we're ready to make those kinds of changes, perhaps after the adoption of the MOVE study at some point. Kurt, do you have anything to add to that? Jonathan, do you mind?
Sure. I'm Kurt Ravenschlag, Chief Operating Officer with RAFTA. Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I think Terry did a great job of summarizing where we stand. So what's really prompting this is RAFTA has 4.3 million as a part of the Destination 2040 ballot initiative to go towards grade separations of 27th Street and State Highway 82, connecting over to our 27th Street station. We've also been successful in securing over $3 million in grant funding to go towards this effort, which they do have horizons for, or sunsets, I should say, for when those funds would expire. So we do have a timeline that we need to advance this project before those grant funds would go away. We also are preparing for this spring, early summer to offer a bond package for a number of capital projects that RAFTA will be advancing from our Destination 2040 ballot initiative. And we would like to include this project within that bond package. For us to be able to do that, though, we need to be able to have assurance that the funding gap that we currently have of roughly 2.2 million, we have a plan of how to address that. And we recognize that Glenwood Springs has accounted for 500,000, and we also recognize the environment that we are all in right now from a funding standpoint, that it's very difficult to come up with additional funds for any projects. So RAFTA provided this proposal of taking some funds. So as a part of Destination 2040, we developed a funding model that identified when projects would be slotted in for implementation based on funding availability over that 20-year span. RAFTA had been accounting for the services that Terry described of extending the BRT and for RAFTA taking over the service on 6 and 24 as regional service beginning in 2019. So there are some savings by not implementing that service. And those services are not at a point of being implemented because Right now, the local system in Glenwood Springs still has some evaluation to do in terms of how that may be reconfigured. And the BRT extension is not ready to be put into place yet, as we're still studying that as a part of the MOVE study. So RAFTA believes that there are some savings that we've accrued by not implementing those services that we could put towards this effort here in Glenwood Springs to be able to fulfill the funding requirements to move this project forward. Now, RAFTA does plan on presenting this concept to the RAFTA board next week to gauge their temperature on this proposal as well, but we also, due to timing, wanted to present this to you all to get a sense of your thoughts on this approach.
Paula and Charlie.
Thank you guys for presenting this, and it's a bit of a dilemma. I can see that. I had a couple questions though. Tara, you mentioned that we did not get the FEMA grant, but has the Garfield County Commissioners been presented with this project directly, and what's their engagement level, since this is a major byway for the whole county? And I'm just wondering if they are participating at any level.
Paula, I haven't been a part of any ask to the county. And as far as I know, I don't believe RAFTA has directly asked the county either. Kurt, can you confirm?
I believe, I think the only ask that we had that related the county was, I believe we submitted a grant for the FMLD funds, which we did not receive.
Yeah.
Okay. And is there any consideration in the future of going back to the commissioners and asking if they can participate?
I think it is highly unlikely that they will participate in that. That being said, if you guys want to ask, we can always send a letter, schedule a meeting. But I'm not. It took us several years of determined multiple asks with multiple presentations to get funding for the 27th Street Bridge and South Midland, and they felt responsible for those. This is not one I think they'll feel responsible for.
So on that note, you had mentioned a sunset for when those grant funds need to be used. And when is that sunset, and is there a potential for delay of starting this project? And I'm just thinking of the consideration that we're going to be working on South Midland, and that traffic is going to be very disrupting. And then we're going to have this project going on, and this traffic's going to be very disrupting. And I'm just trying to get a bigger picture of what the summer looks like for Glenwood Springs. So if you could explain that sunset and when that sunset is.
Dinner break.
That would be great. Sorry, Tony, you're unmuted now. Thanks.
Sure. Well, we have several grants that make up our grant funding. We have a grant from, and Terry, you may actually have to help me here with some of these acronyms because I'm not familiar with all of them. We have $1 million of an MMOF grant. We have another $1 million from CDOT of regional priority funding. And then we have another $1 million for a TAP grant. Each of them will have different requirements in terms of progress being made or activity on those grants. And typically, I can just really kind of speak in a broad sense that we'll have about 2 to 3 years. And we've already been awarded those grants now. We've had that award for about a year. So we're probably about 2 years away.
Yeah. And Paul, I can confirm that, I've had a number of conversations with Nixon, the engineer from RAFTA, and they are really trying to accelerate the project with the belief that, it will take at least 9 months for construction, and they don't believe that, they can, they're under an accelerated design process right now with the hope of actually trying to bring it to bid in September. So I feel like I feel like the time is short, that we're probably under the 2-year scenario. And Nixon and I have talked about traffic and influence between the two projects. And what we've discussed is for him to take our traffic specifications and make the operation of South Midland primary and make the contractors coordinate together to try to alleviate the issues at the state highway.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Other questions? Shelley.
Can I just verify, Terry, and maybe Paul on the, or Kurt, sorry, on the deferment of the payments? So just to be clear, that would be a deferment of operational costs that have been saved in 2019, 2020, and potentially 21. But would those operating costs potentially still be there and go back to normal if those improvements, such as the BRT to downtown and the RAFTA running buses on Highway 6, would be there come 2022 and forward?
That's correct, Shelley. Those are annual allotments for the 20-year span. So as soon as we decide to implement those services, the funding would be there.
Okay, and does that amount to the full 2.27 funding gap, or that came out to 690, or do you have other operational savings that RAFTA is looking at using?
It's approximately 700,000 annually. Mm-hmm. And I believe what we were thinking is that we probably will not be implementing those services this year, next year, or probably even the year after. So there's probably a few years of additional savings that could be accounted for.
Okay, so would that prevent us, say, from having RAFTA take over the service on 6 and 24 if we made a commitment like this? Because that was something that we, had anticipated would happen soon after the bridge construction, basically.
Yes, if for example, we decided to move forward with RAFTA taking that service over, say in 21, that would limit the amount of funds that we would have available to be able to put towards 27th Street. I'm unable to do the math here while speaking with you, but
okay, just to have the general idea, though.
Yeah.
I just want to understand the impacts.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right. I think seems like we have the information we need to it's on our agenda this evening to give a recommendation or to give direction tonight. We also want to talk about the MOVE study.
Yeah, and Jonathan, tonight we're really focusing on the motions that the Transportation Commission has made, in regard to the MOVE study. So what we were hoping for here is really just a nod of heads to see if you guys were okay with this moving forward to the RAFTA board for their approval. And we probably won't bring the funding back up this evening.
That's fine. I guess I'm nodding my head. What does everybody else think? Do I hear or see anybody? I can't see everybody because Terry's large in the picture. Sorry. In the picture. Sorry. Wow. Good job, Jonathan. But does anybody have any objection to moving this forward and at least recommending they go back to RAFTA for their approval? I don't see and I don't hear anything, so I'm taking that as
Charlie, can I just, as I understand it, Terry, in I was looking for it in the materials, and I don't know if it's that or we talk, but we're not going to defer the improvements. We're going to bring us in-house along from the accesses to the Rio Grande Trail. Is that correct?
And that's a part of the MOVE study funding discussion,
Okay.
and I'll talk about it in just a second.
Never mind. I got it confused with this one. No, I have no objection to this to the board, draft board.
Okay, let's move on.
Okay, thank you. So the other thing that we wanted to talk to the council about just a general concurrence is a funding gap, I guess, with the MOVE study. As you know, we've been working on the MOVE study since essentially January or February of this very long year. And the MOVE study is a really large transportation study. We're about a 50% partner with RAFTA in looking at a number of things across the city. We've all talked a lot about the extension of the BRT and where it could go in the city, as well as evaluating a new bus transfer station, whether there are a number of options for that. Evaluating our existing parking, both in our downtown area as well as at the RAFTA stations, deficits and use there. We're evaluating and optimizing the local bus routes, trying to make connections into the BRT system. We're looking at pedestrian and bicycle improvements, and then also evaluating vehicular operations on, say, Highway 82, 8th Street, 9th Street, and looking to optimize those. So at this point, the study's within its original budget. It was originally supposed to conclude in this year, essentially or this year. I guess we're into 2021. It was supposed to conclude last year. We did have a lot of public input, particularly for the Transportation Commission, and there is a fair amount of interest about number of aspects of this, and we've really just begun to have conversations with the DDA about the BRT routes and about the downtown parking, and we have yet to have conversations with either group regarding changes in operations along State Highway 82 and 8th and 9th. So at this time, what we're asking for, or what we're requesting, is to have the study extended another 6 months. We would like to do more public input, and we would like to do virtual modeling of both the Grand Avenue and the Rio Grande Trail options, BRT options. There are a number of different things that we would like to evaluate with the BRT system, before either group, whether it's the DDA or the Transportation Commission, really make a final recommendation to the council about their preferences on the parking or the BRT route or any other aspect of the study. We feel like we've got a fair amount of analysis to go. So the cost of the additional services and the virtual modeling is estimated at $180,000. RAFTA has asked if the city could continue in our current model of funding, half of that each. So we're looking to try to find another $90,000. We told RAFTA that we really don't have additional funds anywhere for anything, and so they proposed, or they were involved in the sale of the MOC. And within the sale of the MOC, there was $200,000 that was allocated towards trail improvements on the Rio Grande Trail. And most of those are, hardening of connections, from Coach Miller, for instance, to the trail, a gravel area there. 12th Street is a similar condition. The elementary school at GSES. We, as the city staff, have walked all of those areas along with our street crews and our parks crews, and decided that, and we worked with RAFTA as well, and decided that we can cut the rails out there, that we can regrade those connections, and that we would have, use of staff time, as well as some minor costs associated with materials. We feel like that we can get those kinds of improvements done for around $20,000. The largest cost that was included in that $200,000 associated with the MOC study was the rebuild of a boulder wall that's right below Orson distribution. It is above the Rafta Trail, and we have had boulders that have kind of slipped out of there, and we've had to kind of pin it back together. We, at this point, the Orson distribution site is one of the sites that's being considered for a downtown bus transfer station. It is owned by Rafta. The design that we had for the stabilization of that wall was to completely take it out and then do a mechanically stabilized wall, put geogrid back into the site to be able to support a new wall there. We feel at this time that we're not certain of the final use of the Orson distribution site, and that it would probably be a good idea to wait to see what the final use was, so that we can determine what we want to do there, and to try to stabilize that wall in a temporary fashion instead of a permanent fashion. So the long and short of it is that we feel like we do still have that $200,000 that was allocated towards the Rio Grande improvements through the sale of the MOC. We feel like that we can do the most important work out there, stabilization of the wall and connections back to the trail, probably for definitely less than 100,000, likely less than 50. And so that we would have some funds that could potentially be reallocated out of those MOC funds back towards the MOVE study. So that's I guess the request for the council. Would the council consider that? Would that be okay with you guys if we were to move some of that funding and move it back towards the study?
Paula, then Charlie.
Hey, Terry, just like I'm listening to this and we're talking about the study and extending it for 6 months, and it feels like some of the discussion that we're going to have later tonight kind of overlaps with this, from the Transportation Commission's suggestions of different ways when we should be doing what moving forward, kind of thing. It seems like they had some priorities that weren't quite the priorities of this study. And how does this impact all this? I mean, the funding, does that mean if we go with the Transportation Committee's suggestions, this is even extended further? I'm just trying to figure out the relationship between these two items.
Yeah. So, the Transportation Commission, and I'm going to just try to summarize them here, just to make it hopefully a shorter, but the first thing that they recommended, and that we'll discuss later on, is that we prioritize the local bus system ahead of the BRT. And I have recommended that the council not adopt that recommendation because it's just not a traditional way of looking at a transportation system. You try to establish the main line first, and then you make the connecting routes. In addition, I believe that we would, if the council wanted to do something like that, we'd have to go back to talk to Rafta about that, and then also propose additional funding just for that. This funding really doesn't cover that idea. And I also feel like, that the council, and maybe the Transportation Commission as well, we may want to hold off on evaluating those recommendations until we have more information that we would gain through this additional study. So I think that we can talk about that a little bit later, but I do feel like they're separate. The costs for that item would be in addition to what we're asking for here for now, and that perhaps the consideration of the recommendation is premature.
Okay, thanks.
Charlie.
Thanks. Terry, I didn't ask you this the other day when we were talking about this Transportation Commission, but how much is the retaining wall if we actually had to do it, depending on what happens with the Orchard site? How much would it cost to do that?
So our estimates with the mechanically stabilized wall were a little over 100,000. You know, it's a pretty substantial structure, and we would have had to, you know, press back into the RAFTA property with the geogrid.
So if we could do the connections, the paving to make those connections better onto the Rio Grande Trail for in-house for roughly 50, we have, in theory, 50,000 available, or we're gonna have to go with money to fix the retaining wall at a later time. Is that what we're talking about?
Perhaps. I do, you know, I do think that our thinking maybe around that site, depending on the outcome of the MOVE study and where, you know, a downtown transportation center might be, you know, may affect, you know, both the use and the funding of a structure out there. My guess is that if RAFTA wanted to use that for a transit center, and you know, it was adopted and approved by the city, I would imagine that, you know, first of all, our design wouldn't be sufficient. You know, they would be wanting to park buses on top of it, and we would need to have a new design, you know, more substantial design. So I believe at that time that RAFTA would probably take over that project and, you know, hopefully fund it.
And the wall's okay, it's stable for right now. That's something we have to immediately do. Is that correct?
You know, I think we should do a little bit more with the wall to stabilize it, but temporary stabilization as opposed to rebuilding.
And the cost of temporary stabilization?
You know, I'm not 100% sure, but we talked about, you know, grouting or other ways to try to stabilize that wall. I think that we could do it, you know,
I'm not going to hold you to it.
Okay.
Pardon?
My guess is that we can probably get all of those things done for under 50,000.
Okay, all right. And I'm not holding you to the numbers. I'm just trying to get some ideas. Thank you, Terry.
Yeah, thank you.
Go ahead, Steve.
Terry, I'm sure it's in the notes, but what the original study is, how much money, how much have we spent on this study already?
So the original study was, and I don't have the number in front of me, but it's about 600 and I'm going to say it's 600 and close to 650, and we are at we're at about 80%. Well, we're not 100% on some elements. I would guess that we're at about 575. I had that number up with me, but those are my guesses right at this moment.
Half of that is ours, the other half is RAFTA. Is that
That's true.
So $600,000 for a study. I hate studies, actually. And it seems like every time we do one, we either put it on a shelf and forget it, or we're coming back, you know, trying to get more money allocated to complete these studies. It just drives me crazy. That's my comment.
Tony.
I agree with Steve. You know, having been a victim of the 99, 2000, 90s rail studies in Aspen, it's just wasted money that was never amounted to anything. I'd like to see something for this. I just don't know what it accomplishes except make some consultants wealthy. So I agree with Steve. Thank you.
Shelley.
I guess I respectfully have to counter a couple of my fellow counselors' comments. Just from the transportation standpoint, I think this study is really important to our vision of the future for Glenwood Springs. That it can really affect the confluence and travel in and out of downtown Glenwood Springs, especially as we look to develop the confluence. Are we going to be directing more vehicles and cars in there and building large parking structures, which our roads probably can't handle that traffic, or are we going to look to a vision of more transit and bike and walking in that area? So I think this study is attempting to kind of move us forward in the direction of prioritizing transit and biking and walking over building more accommodation for single occupant vehicles in our downtown and through our city. It also seeks to work to kind of address some of our commuter problems that, you know, just with our location that we have as a connection from Western Garfield County to Southern Pitkin County. So I think the recommendation to extend the study will help to address, give us more time to address some of the concerns of the Transportation Commission. And I think to answer questions that they have and look to, you know, address some of the issues that they have with the study. So I am for providing this extra funding and adjusting what we're doing along the trail, especially since staff believes that they can get the improvements done on the trail cheaper in-house, get that done. Let's leverage that money and put it to good use on this study and do some real planning around how we want to move people in and out of downtown, how we want to move people and commuters through our town in the future.
Thanks, Shelley. Charlie.
And just real quick, I agree a little bit with Steve. I don't like spending money, and Tony. I don't agree spending money on studies just for study purposes is always a great idea. But I do agree with Shelley as well that I think this study has some real positives it could give us. I would suggest that we defer any. We can't act in work session anyway, but suggest we defer approving this stuff till we've had this discussion with the Transportation Commission and/or the DDA later tonight.
Ingrid, go ahead.
And I'm more along the lines with Steve and Tony and feeling that while I do appreciate and value the information that comes from a study, ultimately, I hate to think that we are doing projects not to the extent that have the longevity that I'd like to see. So when we're pulling funds and not to discredit, I'm sure engineering has looked at these different sites and evaluated that, but I like to see long-term solutions so that we're not coming back again and allocating more money to fix something that we didn't do very well the first time. And so I'm in agreement to either not fund or continue to fund. I mean, 600, that was already a significant amount of money to go towards a study, and or just hold off and defer, like Charlie said, and just evaluate kind of a bigger picture once we hear from the Transportation Commission.
Paul?
Yeah, I'm in agreement with deferring to this later conversation tonight. I just feel like we need to hear the Transportation Commission's concerns and discuss those. And I also am hesitant to look at something that we already contributed to a 600,000 plus study, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, we need 200,000 more. That to me is a huge increase. You know, I'm still trying to put my head around why we're short on this, and we have an unhappy community on some of the things that have been proposed already on traffic patterns for BRT. So I just kind of feel like we haven't moved forward enough, and now we're going to say, okay, let's spend more money on this. So I would at least like to wait till tonight so we hear what the Transportation Commission had to say.
Thanks, Paul. Tony.
Thanks. And just to follow up and agree with Paula, a lot of problems, and I think Terry would agree with these studies, is I don't know when these changes are going to happen. Things change so quickly, automobile patterns, pandemics, telecommuting, light rail, and then we do these studies and then we have an EIS or whatever, and then 5 years later we just have to do it again. So when we talk later, I'm opposed to any sort of this continuing to spend these kinds of dollars on studies when we need to be spending money on infrastructure and fixing our streets in the short term and worrying about traffic patterns 10 years from now. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I noticed that Kurt lit up, and I don't know if he wants to give any input here. I'll put you on the spot, Kurt. I just noticed you came back online, so.
No, I appreciate that. And I just was going to provide the comment from RAFTA's perspective that, you know, my background is as a transportation planner, so I'm obviously have a bias towards planning and studies. RAFTA intends to extend our BRT to West Glenwood Springs to be able to connect to our additional members, Newcastle, as well as being able to serve our customers who live in the Colorado River Valley. If the answer was clear of how we were to accomplish that, we probably wouldn't need a study. But the answer isn't clear of how we facilitate that movement of getting our BRT to West Glenwood. The two options that have risen to the top is us constructing a facility on RAFTA-owned property to facilitate that movement, or coordinating with CDOT and Glenwood Springs on facilitating that movement on State Highway 82. The study is intended to allow for public participation so that the communities and the stakeholders and the members of RAFTA can be able to make an informed decision on which path to go. And the reason why the study has been prolonged and the scope is increased is because, based on public input and primarily input that we received from your Transportation Commission, we have added additional scenarios and options to look at and study and analyze of how we could facilitate that. So the scope has grown based on public input of what we are to be looking at and analyzing, which is the primary reason why the study has been prolonged and why the scope has increased.
All right. Any other questions or comments? Anything else from RAFTA or staff?
I don't think I have anything to add. Thank you.
We will talk about it more this evening and possibly take a vote.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody. Looks like we're actually a little bit ahead of time. We will reconvene back here at 6:10 p.m. We'll see you there.
Okay. Thank you.
I hope, Kurt, you're going to be available for that later session.
I will be.
All right, thank you.
Jonathan, I forgot, we don't have to log out, right? Just,
Yeah, no.
okay, thanks.
If you want to, that's fine. But you can I just turn my video off, my sound off, and
No, leave your video on. I like to watch.
Oh, well, I'm doing a workout right now with Sharma. So if
Let me see that.
If you want to see me do a workout, I'll keep my video on.
No, thank you. I'll turn my camera off.